So today, Ryan and I are going to talk about, can you measure sales lift at retail from influencer marketing? Ryan, this is one of the more challenging things we get asked to do a lot.
It is. I mean, with digital marketing, you have a lot of great tools at your disposal to measure results digitally. I mean, the ultimate gold is when you can draw a direct line from uh, your marketing efforts to purchase, like for a nice direct ROI. That's always, the holy grail there of being able to draw that conclusion. But when you have something that interrupts the transmission of the ones and zeros like real life space,
Yeah.
it gets a little bit hard to bridge that gap, and becomes much more challenging to draw the line from uh, in reality IRL activity and purchase to digital marketing attribution.
Yes. And we've had clients ask us to do this, and we wanted to share today 4 ways that we found it can work, that you can measure the sales, the pros and cons of each, because, of course, if it was perfect, you'd already know about it because everyone would be doing it. So the first one I think about as a geofence with test and control, which a lot of people just don't think of when it comes to influencer. And I'll set this up a little bit, Ryan, and then maybe you can talk about the mechanism of it. But
Mm-hmm.
we did this with a ground beef client, sold in Kroger's and lots of other grocery stores all across the U.S. We're doing programs every month for them, and they asked the logical question: we're investing all this money. Is it driving any sales? Are we moving any beef because of it? And even though it was a significant amount of money to them relative to marketing across thousands and thousands of grocery stores, it got thin really quick. And so what we did is we worked with them to segment out a part of the country and have that as a test, and another part of the country as control. Ryan, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so really just to emphasize the importance of that control. I mean, this will apply to, I think, pretty much all of the tactics that we're going to talk about, and it's just a really good best practice. Measuring, first of all, a baseline of what your sales are in each location, especially if there's seasonality, understanding what that seasonality is and where those shifts are. Ideally, timing your study when it makes sense seasonally, when there's not a lot going on. Also, you don't want to have marketing efforts going on outside of what you want to test, because that can have an influence too. So what we really wanted to do was identify locations that there wasn't anything going on. We wanted to identify a handful of locations where we wouldn't have any influencer impact. We weren't targeting with influencers. That would be our control, so that effectively all things are equal. And the only differentiator between one group of locations and the other group of locations is that the other group of locations would be targeted with the influencer activation, so that we could see what is the difference in sales across the sales differential based on what we would normally expect from a region versus what we got, and how is that lift present or not present, and to what degree in comparison to the control region and the influencer region.
Yeah, people get hung up on this because for 2 reasons. One, well, we sell all across the country. Why would we just shrink it down like this?
Mm-hmm.
Specifically to get the answer to this question: is
Right.
influencer marketing and expecting to have enough budget to have a measurable lift,
Mm-hmm.
which is the key point here. So that's one. And the other is that you can't just hire, if Atlanta is one of the DMAs you want to be in, you can't just hire influencers from Atlanta. Almost every influencer has followers across the country. There are very few geographically concentrated influencers. And so you have to take the best content and then you have to syndicate it in that geofence also. And that's where you're going to get most of your impressions.
Mm-hmm.
And with this one, it worked. I mean, we saw a measurable lift in daily sales and a measurable lift in sales velocity. Of course, you need to have the data from the retail partner, and they typically charge for that. So if you don't have that, that's a challenge.
Yeah, the cost can certainly add up. Again, going back to what you just said, focusing on a smaller region, you don't need as much budget to see measurable results. If you're talking about a countrywide campaign, you're going to need a lot of money to really invested into advertising to really see a noticeable, measurable lift. So yeah, biting it off into smaller chunks allows you to answer that question. And the wider it gets, the more expensive it gets too, with the amount of not just ad dollars that go into it, but the amount of dollars that go into the study itself, and to be able to get even the data that you need to run the analysis.
Yep. So that's the first one. Really good if you're already paying for retail sales data. The second one is promotion codes or coupon redemptions. We did this, it was a couple of years ago now, for Ready Whip at Walmart. And what we were driving to, the call to action was to download a coupon. And we were fortunate that we basically ran out of coupons, at 250,000 of them within just a few days. And, the client was very pleased with that. Challenges, though, you need a coupon partner like coupons.com or somebody like that. And not everybody does that. Not every retailer uses coupons, those sorts of things. So another one that's similar that we get asked about a lot is, can I use, Sally 20, Ryan 20, Joe 20 to track influencer sales on our website? Is that an effective way to do it, Ryan, or what problems are you going to run into there?
So it is a good way to track from A to B, coupon code to actual purchase. Where it can get a little hairy is, what if these codes get picked up by there's a whole culture of couponing out there on the internet, and once a coupon's out there, it can rapidly explode and just be everywhere. So almost the influencers potentially losing, it's not whoever's redeeming these coupons, they're not necessarily getting it from the influencer. They could be getting it from some of these other coupon sites. There's a question about, whether or not that matters. The coupon is out there. It made its way out there and people redeemed it and they used it. I think where there's a grayer area is, what is the value of the message that the influencers have when they are controlling that message and providing that coupon, that might be missed out on by someone who's getting it from a coupon site. You're not getting that influencer's take, that influencer's experience, the messaging of the campaign. So what is that sale redemption coming with? Is it surface level, or is it a little bit more meaningful? Is it achieving what you want the campaign to achieve?
Yeah. And sites like Honey and Rakuten and all these others, they have things in your browser. You're going to buy it anyway, but you just go get the promo code. And we had a client who kind of got upset that one of the influencer promo codes was being widely used. And it's like, you hired us to get this promo code noticed. That was the whole point.
Yep.
But yeah, because those sites exist, it's a significant chance of overcounting the impact of the influencer.
Yeah.
So that's a risk there. But a third one, so that's the second one, coupons, promotion codes. And even with coupons, if you've done coupons before, then you're layering an influencer, you want to sort of lean into this third one, which is having a benchmark to compare it to. And so for a program we were doing for a makeup brand at a drugstore chain, a very well-known drugstore chain in the U.S., one of the big two, we were looking at driving sales. It was a buy one get one offer on a particular day. It was a particular day, and so we wanted to drive sales. Now, one of the challenges in all retail marketing, Ryan said, try and find a time when there's nothing going on. There's almost never nothing going on. You got email promotions, you got end caps, you might be included in their app, all those, pricing promotions, all
Bad
those
weather
things. Say what?
Bad weather, keeping people home.
Bad weather. Seriously. You've got all these things that impact sales. So it's very difficult to get a clean benchmark. But for this one, we had the similar offer. It was the same offer, a BOGO on the same product at the same retailer, even the same day of the week, which happened to be a Sunday, and it was only 90 days earlier. So the stars sort of aligned that we had a really clean benchmark. And that time, the first time they had used email and circular to promote it, the next time they used us and they used influencer. In that case, we moved 209% more units that day than the benchmark event 90 days earlier. It was 300% more than a normal Sunday, which isn't too surprising. So that's great, and it was really credible, and it made a lot of sense. It's just really hard to find a benchmark that
Yeah.
isn't got some sort of stink on it, right, Ryan?
Yeah, that is the real science to it, is really getting a good baseline that you can trust as that control, so you can assess the impact overall that you have with a
Yeah.
campaign. And when you see something like a 200-300% increase, and you're looking at those baselines that are 200-300% lower, you can definitely, and that nothing else is happening on that day, it makes it a nice way to prove that case, because what else was going on, and you saw such a significant, you could see, maybe you see a 20% increase. That becomes a little bit harder to say, okay, it was definitely this program. You could say it was likely this program that had a little bit of an increase, but when you see something in hundreds, 200s, 300% increase, I think it makes it's hard to say that that's not what drove it.
Right. And well, this one had a BOGO to it. So anytime you do a buy one, get one offer, you're going to expect units to increase. Somebody buying one is
Exactly.
going to
Yeah.
just go ahead and get two, right? But since the benchmark was a BOGO too, we were
Yep.
able to say, yeah, so we sort of validated that.
The
Now, a
more you
lot
can
of times we do,
normalize, the more you can normalize the amount of variables, or limit the amount of variables that are in play when comparing baseline to implementation, is crucial. Keeping everything as similar as possible is really the only way to do it.
yeah. A lot of times we do brand lift studies, which
Mhm.
measure people who are exposed to the message and if they're likely to buy, but those aren't really
Mhm.
measuring sales. There was a really interesting sales lift study done by Nielsen Catalina. Nielsen's one of the big leaders in this space.
Yep.
And it was for Silk almond milk. And they found an incremental $285 worth of sales for every 1,000 people exposed to the campaign. That's a lot. In fact, that's 16 times higher ROI than the average digital marketing campaign that they measure. They, in fact, measured it twice because it was so much higher than banner ads and things. So great. Influencer marketing works better than banner ads. I'm not surprised by that personally. Banner ads are kind of not interesting.
Mhm.
Influencer content should be. But the way they had to do it is they had to know who saw the influencer content and who didn't,
Mhm.
and then track them through to sales. The only way for them to do that, at least at the time, was to
Mhm.
pixel the websites on which the blog post appeared. Now, you can't pixel TikTok, you can't pixel Facebook, you can't pixel Snapchat. And so it took out all that social, which is today what 90+% of influencers. So and it was fairly expensive. They had to get enough blog posts to expect enough people to see them to expect a measurable lift in sales again. And so there's all this anecdotal data that says, yes, when people see influencer content, they buy the product, which makes
Mhm.
sense. If it doesn't work, like, why are we advertising anything ever, right? And so it makes sense. But unless you're doing a blog heavy promotion, it's probably unapproachable for
Mhm.
most brands. So,
And
Ryan, are there
budget.
other ways to do this?
Uh yeah, I mean, there's a handful. I mean, you could apply what we've talked about to different methodologies, just the core concepts of finding something small enough to test, to have an impact on with what budget you have, making sure you have a control, and you have your baselines set. A few other things that you could do. These are typically very, very expensive, traditionally very expensive. Have seen a few offerings that are a little bit more affordable. So maybe in the next 5 years, we'll start to see these become a little bit more budget friendly. But media mix modeling is something that's used if you have a big budget, and you have a very large marketing machine. Mixed media modeling is used to kind of see what levers in your marketing mix are really pushing to those results. And there can be MMM implementations that will take into account, like we talked about, weather. So it'll take into account what you're doing from your different marketing channels, but it can take into account also some environmental factors that might have an impact as well. So you can get incredibly complex with that. And these are typically more effective when you have many different marketing tactics beyond just social, beyond just influencer, but we're talking, mail, TV, digital, etc. Those, of course, come at a very, very pricey price point, and so are not as common or necessarily advisable for something like a smaller budget program.
Yeah.
Can also do foot traffic studies as well. It depends a lot, again, as we talked about, with your relationship with retail. If you have control over your retail locations and you get the data from your retail locations, you can be a little bit more targeted, especially if you have that data communication between the people on the ground and your marketing data. So you can be a little bit more targeted, especially if there's a specific store that you want to focus on and you want to compare that to your store spread in a few different regions.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked to one retail client of ours, a very large retailer, and foot traffic seemed to be the way to answer a particular question they had. And we calculated out the size of the influencer program we would need to expect a measurable lift in sales across all of these stores across the country. I think it was in the neighborhood of 450,000. And his answer was, I'm not that curious, actually. And so I think that's part of the question. How curious are you?
Yeah.
And how comfortable are you? And that goes back to, how are you measuring everything else you're doing?
Yep.
Are you putting influencer under a microscope while you're looking at every other result through a telescope? If so, you may want to rethink that. But if not, we've outlined here 4 different ways that influencer marketing can be used to measure sales lift at retail. I hope they're helpful for you. And if they are, we'd be happy to partner with you on them. Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.